Welcome back. With the Ozio Authentic Sushi website, I'm going to take a look at the featured section now. So the featured section is right below the hero section. We're going to create this section and it's going to be divided into 3 different areas. So one section for the featured area, and these are featured items. So we have a seasonal soup dividing area, a savory sushi divided area, and an undeniable udon area. In each one of these areas, we're going to have an image, a heading 2, paragraph text, and a button. Once we've created one dividing area, we can simply duplicate that because the layout is similar for the savory sushi and the undeniable udon. We can copy and paste that content and then just swap out the images and the text for the correct text and the correct images. All right, with that as our goal, let's go to the HTML file and we're going to start to create the section for featured. I know that this section will be below the hero section, so I'm clicking the hero section. I can see the section where it starts and where it ends. I've also added an HTML comment just to show me where the section ends. Underneath that, I'm going to simply create a new section. It only happens once on the page, so it's going to have an ID, and it's going to be called featured. Inside this featured section, I'm going to have some more div tags, but let's start with setting up the featured section. I'm going to go into my style.css file and type in hashtag featured, and we'll just start to define this area. I know that it's going to have a width of 1000 pixels because that's the width of the website. I'm unclear on the height, so I'm going to throw in 500 pixels to begin with. I know this is a major area, so I want to have this floated to the left. In general, everything floats to the left unless you want it to float to the right, and you'll know if you want it on the right. I don't want anything on the left or right of this featured area, so again, I'll just type in clear both. And to see this in the page, I'm just going to add a background color so I can see where this is. Aqua sounds great. Save that file and preview where we're at in the web browser so far. All right, so I can see I've got the header at the top, the hero section, and this big blue area here for our featured section. Fantastic. Now we need to go back to the index file, and in the index file again for the HTML, I want to add my first dividing area, so div, and this is going to be a repeatable area, so I'm going to, instead of use ID, I'm going to call it a class. And I'm going to try and use a generic name that can be applied to all these different div items inside the featured section. So I'm going to call it featured dash item. Inside this featured dash item, I'm going to have an image, and that's going to go inside a paragraph tag. I'm going to have a heading 2. And I'm going to have some descriptive text in a paragraph. And I'm also going to have a button down here that's going to be inside a paragraph tag. All right, now I need to go back to Photoshop and grab some of the content from Photoshop to be able to add it into this area. Back inside Photoshop, I'm going to close the triangle on the hero sections, and I'm going to go into the feature sections. I have soups, sushi, and udon all in Photoshop layer groups. And I'm simply going to turn the triangle on all the main areas, the sushi, the soups, and the udon. And what I can do in Photoshop, which has been fantastic, is I can select the image for the pumpkin chipotle soup. I can also select on the maki sushi, and I can go down and find the udon. So with these 3 images selected, these are the 3 images in the featured area, I can right click on any one of these images and I can export as. Because I've selected all 3 individually, Photoshop recognizes them as individual images and tells me that they're each 319 pixels wide by 158 pixels tall, which is great. I now know the rough width of my dividing area. Over in the file settings, I make sure that they're JPEGs because they're photographs. 60% quality is fine for what we're looking at. And I can export all. I'm going to choose to make sure that they export into the images folder, and I'm going to export them now. Great. Let's make sure they're in the images folder. And so I'm going to open up the Ozio folder again, and inside the images folder I can see that I have images here. Now I have a few issues with these images that I've exported, because in web you shouldn't have any spaces inside the image titles. And I see that these two images have spaces in there, so I've got to remove those. The other thing I'd like to do is, because these are featured images, I want to put the word featured in front. So this will make it much easier to find all of these images as we go along. As we add more and more images, it'll make it harder to find if they're all starting with different letters, so featured is a wonderful addition to this. I'm going to go into the Maki Sushi, and I'm going to remove that space and put an underscore. So now there's no spaces in this file title, and that's perfect. I want to make sure I go to the pumpkin chipotle soup and remove these spaces here, and I'm going to put an underscore as well. Great. So all of the images inside the image folder have no spaces. I'm ready to carry on. So I'm going to go back to the HTML, and inside the first paragraph tag is where I'm going to add the first image. Open angle bracket, img, source equals images folder, and I know the first image is the pumpkin chipotle soup. And there it is. Let's add a width, and the width is going to be 319 pixels, and the height. Here's a trick for you. In brackets, I love that I can hover over the JPEG title and it'll pop up a thumbnail image if everything's linked properly, and it tells me the first value for the width is 319 and the height is 158 pixels. So I'm going to simply type in for the height 158, and I need to add an alternative text in here, and this works for accessibility. And what I will do is I'm going to type seasonal soups, and I'm simply going to copy and paste the name of this soup in here to help anybody who is low vision or has screen readers to read this website, that they'll be able to know what this image is about. And it also works for Google in terms of their search engine optimization too. Alright, so in the image tag I've got the source, I've got the width, I've got the height, and I've got the alt tag. Perfect. I'm going to go to Photoshop and I'm going to copy the title and then the paragraph text. So seasonal soups, copy, paste that in between the heading 2 tags, the H2 tags, back to Photoshop, and I'm going to grab the copy for the paragraph text here. And the last one I don't need to copy, it's just the word more. Alright, so now I've got my first featured item in here, and what I need to start doing is I'm going to start to create rules for featured item. So I'm going to go back to my style where I create all the rules, and under the featured area I'm going to make sure that I have featured item. Because this is a class and not an ID, I add a dot in front of featured item. And much like everything else, this is a box. I know that the width is going to be 319 pixels. And the height I'm unclear of, so I'm just going to add a 500 pixel height in here as well. I know that this needs to float to the left, specifically in this one because I want to have 3 featured items in here, and the items are all going to float next to each other, so they all have to have float left. I don't want to add a clear at this point because I don't want to, I want to make sure all the images are side by side, and a clear will push them below, kind of like a soft return. Alright, I'm going to add a background color here as well, and again I'm just going to remove these colors. These are just colors I'm playing with to make sure that I can see what we've got here. So I'll choose Cadet Blue for right now. Great. I'm going to take a look in the web browser again and see where we're at. Okay, fantastic. So already I can see that I've got the soup in here, I've got the heading 2 and the paragraph text and more in here. I need to design it a little bit better than this, but it's starting. So the next thing I want to do is I'm just going to fix up this whole seasonal soups area by controlling the heading 2, designing that, as well as the paragraph text and more. And then we'll work with the spacing inside the featured area. So back in Photoshop, if I click inside seasonal soups, I can see it's titanium web bold at 16 point. So back inside brackets, I can make sure that I tell any heading 2 inside the featured item. So feature dot featured item space when there's a heading 2, then make it titanium web bold. Scroll all the way up to the top, copy my font family, titanium font bold, and I'm going to go for the font size. I believe the font size is still 16. Great. 16 pixels. Not a direct translation between pixels and points, but close enough for what we're doing today. I remember that it's also supposed to be a bold font. The heading 2 by default will be bold, but we're just going to make sure that we type in the weight of 700 and make sure that that's bold. All right. By default, the font color will be black. And I believe if I look back in the design, all of these heading 2s, the text transform is uppercase. They're all capitalized. So I'm going to go back here and make sure inside the CSS code that I have the text transform set to uppercase. And I'll take a look inside the web browser and see where we're at. Great, starting to come along nicely. Back inside Photoshop, I'm going to double check, and this paragraph text is also in titanium web regular 12 point. So back inside the CSS, I'm going to go and create another rule for featured item and make sure I'm dealing with the P tag or the paragraph tag at this point in time. And I'm simply going to copy some of the text here, the font family, the font size, and I'll change the font size to 10 pixels, 12 pixels. Great. And the font weight, I'm going to try 200 and see how that looks. Okay, it's a little light, so I'm going to try the 400 and see how that looks. All right, that looks a little bit better. You'll notice that the more tag has also taken on the same paragraph settings as this. So what we can do inside here is we can create a class inside the paragraph tag, and we can call it class of button, and then we can make sure that that's or featured dash button, and we can make sure we can style that paragraph tag differently than the regular paragraph tag. All right, so back inside the HTML, I'm going to find the paragraph tag with more. I'm going to add a class to that. And I'm just going to call it class of featured button. Yes, I realize the class name is actually longer than the whole word inside the paragraph tag, but that's the way we're going to start. So I can go into my style.css and I can create a rule for this. And again, it's a class, so a dot at the beginning, curly brackets, and we can start to change it. So I'm going to say, okay, great, make the color for this white. And let's just check and make sure if it turned white, so I know I'm dealing with the right area. And it is perfect. I want to add a text transform here to make sure it's all uppercase. I'm going to add a background color. And I'm simply going to choose anything right now because I'm going to go to Photoshop and grab the exact hexadecimal color out of that. So inside Photoshop, grabbing my eyedropper tool, clicking on the green, I can pull the exact green out of here. And I know that it is going to be this hexadecimal number, so I'm going to copy that back inside CSS. Shift 3 to add the hashtag, paste that color from Photoshop and look at it again inside a web browser. All right, so the exact same issues that we had with the try our new fall specialties. This is a block item, which means it's displaying as a block, and we need to change the display to be inline. We need to add some padding in here as well. So that's not a problem. We can change all of those things. So I'm going to add a display. Instead of block, I'm going to choose inline. I know that this is going to have some space around the outside, so I tend to put the padding margin up at the top. I'm going to say padding 0, 0, 0, 0. And again, the first 0 is top, right, bottom, left. And I'm going to add 5 pixels to the top and bottom. See how that works. And I'm just going to add 5 pixels to the left and to the right and take a look and see what we've got. All right, good. I like that, what it's looking like so far. Again, I tend to put more spacing on the left and right than I do the top and bottom, so I'm just going to change those to 3 and see how that looks. All right, that looks not too bad. I can even go a little bit smaller, but I'll let you play with that. Okay, I realize that it needs to have a border radius, so rounded corners, border radius, and we'll do 3 pixels. 3 pixels on all the corners, and there it's got just a little bit of a rounded corner to it. And you can start to play with this all you want. I can go back and I can start to say, okay, great, let's copy some of these rules now for the fonts. And I can say, great, let's change this font to be 10 pixels, make it a little bit smaller. Great. Titanium Web 400. If I change it to 200, what does that look like? All right, perfect. And now I can start to play around with a few other things. So what I can say is for paragraph tags, if I want spacing between the bottom, I can go right back into this paragraph tag and I can say, great, I'm going to add a margin to the bottom and let's add 20 pixels and see what that looks like. All right, so it's a little bit too much. And again, now we're just playing with sizes. So a little spacing here and a little spacing between the image and the heading 2 text as well. I'm going to go to the featured item and I'm going to remove the cadet blue right now because I don't think I need that color, and remove the aqua color in the background of my featured. All right, it's starting to come along. Fantastic. I'm going to now go back to the featured item here and I'm going to push the content a little bit away. So I'm going to add in the featured, hashtag featured rule, add some padding because I want to add spacing inside. Push the elements inside featured away from the edges. So for the top, I'm going to add the 10 pixels that we've been adding for a little bit here. Not too bad. And I want to add a little bit more to this side, so we'll see if this works. And because we're going to have things on either side, if I do 5 pixels, I should do 5 pixels to the edge down here. So inside the featured item, I should actually be adding some margin, pushing these elements away from each other. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And I am just going to say, great, on the right hand side, let's do 5 pixels. Okay. So it's starting to shape up. Wonderful. If I've got this the way I like it, then what I can do is I can go back into the content area and say this is the first featured item, and I see the div tag start and end. So I can add a quick HTML comment here and say that this is where the seasonal soups end. And now I'm going to simply copy this entire div tag of the featured item. I'm going to paste it once and paste it twice. And now I can start to see what this looks like and how the elements are going to line up. Perfect. I want to make sure I've got this clear. Featured item, the first featured item, the second featured item is not going to be the pumpkin soup. So in the image area, I'm just going to walk through and put the quotes back in and say this is the images for the maki sushi. And I'm going to simply call it sushi, just like we did before, and then make sure I add this as well. Hopefully this will give a little bit more information. If people know what the maki sushi looks like, then they'll be able to see this. Maki sushi, and I'm going to go back to Photoshop now, and I'm going to copy the information for the sushi area. So the title is Savory Sushi. I'm going to highlight that. Copy, paste, copy the paragraph text, and paste. And the featured button will be the same. And I want to make sure that the closing tag here, copy Savory Sushi, and make sure I put that properly so I know that the seasonal soup ends up here and the Savory Sushi ends here. And I can go back to my code, and already it's changed and it's looking a lot better. The final image that I have to replace in text is for the udon, so make sure inside the images I'm choosing the udon JPEG. Seems to have left some of the other image text in there, so I'm just going to delete that. And now I've got my images featured udon, close that quote, so it's good, the width and the height are good, and I know that this is undeniable udon, so I'm going to copy that text to begin with, paste it inside the heading 2, and just to make sure I don't lose this, I'm going to paste it inside the alternative text as well, and I'm just going to leave it as undeniable udon. I'm going to copy the paragraph text for the udon, copy, and paste, and the more button can be there as well. And I want to make sure that I change the comment down here from seasonal soups to undeniable udon, and that way I can see the seasonal soups ends, the savory sushi ends, and then undeniable udon ends. Save this information and go back in, and you can really start to see the web page taking shape. All right, so those are I think that's all I need to talk about for the featured area. There are a few other things I'd like to just adjust the spacing in between the elements, but that's just dealing with the margin inside each of the featured item areas. I'll let you play with that and work that out as your design senses allow you. The height of this area I know is too tall for 500 pixels, so I'll have to shorten that as well. But I think we're well on our way.